Well, it's the second weekend, or following the second weekend after Captain Marvel has been out. So I figure now is good enough time as any to discuss Captain Marvel, the aftermath. So, all the while the promotion for Captain Marvel, which I thought was terrible, and just basically gave credence and backed up, which it didn't have to, Brie Larson's sexist bigotry. And they went with that as if that's some grand goal to pursue. Remember, you don't fight sexism with more sexism. You don't fight bigotry with more bigotry, but that's what the left thinks is great now, I guess. So they doubled down on that. The future is female and all that stuff. And all the while, I was thinking the movie could still do well. And the sad thing is, this might do some damage to a movie that might be pretty good. Well, the movie did do well, but it wasn't very good. And this isn't like something new in that sense of a movie that's rather lackluster or kind of stupid. There were movies, MCU movies that I didn't like. The Spider-Man movie, I don't like it. That was a big disappointment because it was such a ballyhooed thing of Marvel getting Spider-Man back, and now we're going to do him right. And jeez, that's not Spider-Man. Michael Keaton was good, but that's about it. Black Panther was okay. That one, and compared to Captain Marvel, Black Panther is a good movie. It's grossly overrated, but as a movie, it works, and you have some good performances in there, and so on and so forth. But Captain Marvel, not so much. It's just a movie that starts off, looks kind of interesting, and about less than 40 minutes, that's about as good as it gets, and then it falls apart. And the rest of it is the same old template. We got to build up our female hero. So how do we do that? Do we tell her story? Do we give her a great story? Do we show her character development? Do we show her build up? Do we show her a struggle and then overcome her own flaws to achieve victory? No, there's none of that in there. Not really. It's just men who have already been established as impressive. We turn them into clowns. So Coulson and of course Nick Fury are just mocked and treated like idiots. And that's how you do that. It's not as bad as what happened in Star Wars. Now, Star Wars is the big warning here. The stupid identity and gender politics template of how to promote your movie, certainly you can trace that to Ghostbusters, and that failed miserably. Captain Marvel did not fail like that. But with Star Wars, you saw a giant of a franchise just explode and commit suicide in one movie. And that was The Last Jedi. Captain Marvel is not The Last Jedi. Although there are similarities in here in the destruction of characters. And certainly Nick Fury is one which they did. They mocked him and belittled him and all that stuff. But not to the extent of what they did to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. So we're not quite there with that, and depending on what happens in Endgame, and the thing is, that could have been, depending on if they had made Nick Fury do something that was really dark or bad to the point that really you couldn't possibly see him as a hero anymore, then I suppose, yeah, that could have been your Last Jedi moment. But on the whole, the Captain Marvel movie set in the 90s and all that sort of stuff, it might not have had that devastating of an impact. Whereas Endgame certainly can. Endgame is the big payoff after the huge success of Infinity War and all that emotion that it roused up. And now here comes the final chapter and the payoff for what happened there. And here comes Captain Mary Sue. and so oh no, could that damage it to where it's so stupid, where all the other characters, and specifically the male characters, are made to be idiots around her, and all that sort of thing, and the purpose of making her look good. And remember, if this is a template, they follow this template over and over again of building up a female character at the expense of a male character, which means you don't respect the female character. I don't care that you're too stupid to understand that, but it's true. Yeah, you want to present a strong female character, then just do it. But when you do it in this manner, for that misandry is the means by which a woman achieves greatness, I shouldn't have to spoon feed this to you. But ultimately, that is not just insulting to men, it's insulting to women. But does this mean that it has to be that way? I would hope not. I hope they have a decent storyline for Captain Marvel in game, but I'm dubious, especially since they followed the Captain Marvel of current comic books, which is just absolute trash. Ms. Marvel, and there are old stories they could have utilized, could have been a fairly interesting character, but they just didn't pursue that. But even with all of that, she should have been weaved into the story. They didn't do that, so at this point, it was too late to just suddenly slap in a prequel movie. And, oh yeah, she was always along for the ride. She was just busy for 20 years out in space, trying to find where the Skrulls could go. And the Skrulls, that's another thing that's devastating here. But it can't be like with Star Wars, where you had a long, decades-old established characters and all that. Most people, the average moviegoer, doesn't know the real story of the Kree and Skrull, but they were both empires. It was not the one empire committing genocide against the other one. That's not the story. And they just threw that out. I suppose they could rework that for a secret. People keep muttering about hopefully they'll do a secret invasion storyline, which was one of the stories about the Skrulls invading the Earth. And that could be a great story. But as it is now, it doesn't work. But it's been 20 years since Captain Marvel's adventure happened, so maybe things have changed, and now there suddenly is a Skrull empire. And the war goes on. But, you know, we'll have to see. But the way they treated it in that for a cheap little story about, oh, the Kree calls them terrorists. Yeah, you know where they're going. It was cheap, lazy, and slapped on for an entire storyline that's shoehorned into their overall MCU story. They don't respect their MCU story when they do that, and they didn't really respect Captain Marvel in treating it like this. Probably at best should have held off until after Endgame, and you're in your new phase of movies that they're doing, and you bring in a Captain Marvel character. The other thing that was ridiculous was that Marvel had to be a woman. Well, we know why, because it's a misandrous movie, and there's no way they could have the idea that a man had anything to do with her getting her powers, because in the original story, it's Marvel's DNA that mixes with hers that gives her these superpowers. In this story, it's just kind of a stupid accident. And Marvel, she had the Tesseract as part of the power source for her new, project, and it's within the craft that crashed and all that. And then Carol shoots it to keep it out of the hands of Jan Rog, and the accident happens, and she gets her powers and all that. So, well, there was no reason for the gender swap of Marvel even there, because Marvel doesn't give her any powers. She's already dead, so he would have been dead too. So oh man, it's just, again, stop fighting sexism with sexism. I mean, it's just so totally unnecessary to do that, but won't damage it to the average moviegoer because they don't know who these characters are. And that's another thing. You didn't really do a whole lot of development here for story. You got something of the Kree, but not a whole lot really. But I suppose Captain Marvel 2 can build on that. Hopefully, but I suppose they'll be thinking about how to kick men in the balls again. I don't know. More than they will their own story. So, there is the hope that a better director team, which is what the Russo brothers are, can get a better performance out of Brie Larson in this movie. I do not like Brie Larson because of the statements she's constantly made and her ignorant and bigoted attitudes. But that doesn't mean she can't do a good job. I didn't really see much in the Captain Marvel movie, but there's a good chance maybe we'll see better in Endgame, hopefully. But boy, I tell you, if she's just going to be the Mary Sue who solves everything while everybody else is just sitting around holding the cat. They made Nick Fury hold the cat while the women did everything. So then yes, Endgame will have it will just be awful. And but it will still make its money. Now, some people were pushing, saying this thing could hit $3 billion and all that, and yeah, maybe so, because the MCU brand is powerful, and it's there because they got into the hearts of the moviegoers and the fans of it. Certainly with Marvel comic book fans initially. But then the excitement, it managed to capture with the storytelling ideas that came out of Marvel Comics since the 60s, was that it was a universe, that this was a world, that these characters all lived in together and they would meet one another. And it's really quite simple when you think about it. But its cohesiveness would just added to the magic of the fantasy. And so ever since Iron Man 1, when Nick Fury's there at the end, there you go, and it had this magic and allure to it, even though quite a few of the movies weren't so great. But still, that brand name wins out. So like the new contender comes in, DCEU, and they kind of drop the ball from the get-go. Oh, they're never forgiven for it. And then, Wonder Woman came forth, but that's an whole other story, about how less is more and simplicity is the best way to go. Don't overcomplicate things and that sort of thing, is a lesson to learn from, Wonder Woman, which in a lot of ways is very similar to how Iron Man was handled. Very true to the source material, very basic, story, of beginning, middle, and end. And, but Wonder Woman, of course, embarrassed the MCU. Hey, how come you have... And, of course, the obvious thing would have been the Black Widow movie, which I think would have been much better. She's already established. You've got a bona fide movie star in the role. They're going to do one, apparently, and it'll have to be another prequel type thing, I guess, but what have you. But, oh, good Lord. They really dropped the ball there. So then they do this whole thing, and it has to be all about feminism and everything, just out of embarrassment that they didn't have a Wonder Woman-like movie for Marvel. And, this wasn't it. Wonder Woman is leaps and bounds superior to the Captain Marvel film, and that's just the way it is. Probably also in no small part in that the actress playing Wonder Woman is a woman, while Brie Larson is just an aging bratty girl. And that's just the way. Sorry, but it's just the way it is. But, again, even when it's someone I don't like, and there's quite a few, I'm not too happy with Mark Ruffalo. Ruffalo's not a good example. I guess Chris Evans has said some things that I don't care for, but he does a damn good job as Captain America. And I'm going to miss him in that role. So, I'm not impressed with Brie in the first movie, but again, Endgame could show that she can do better, and maybe with a better team behind her, you can get a better Captain Marvel movie. I hope so, but at this point, with the direction they're going, Disney actively admitting that they did some manipulation here with the online media. We're fighting the trolls. Well, you leaned on Rotten Tomatoes. And got a lot of shill and access media sites to constantly lie that the Rotten Tomatoes was being review bombed. They weren't. They asked a question: do you or do you not want to see the movie? It's a yes or no question. Did it ever occur to you that someone might say no? And large numbers did, and that's all there was to it. There were no reviews. There were people commenting about, I don't want to see it because I don't like Brie Larson and whatever. So that's that. So, and yet still, to this day, access media sites continue to lie about that. Then YouTube changed their algorithm so that only certain videos could make it to the top. You have to praise Brie Larson. Otherwise, they won't see it. So this kind of thing, all of this for this movie it's a smash hit, you shouldn't have needed to do that then. Then, of course, there's the saturation of the theaters. And lastly, there's people, I've seen this story about, they bought up the tickets because there's theaters saying we had reserved seats and they never showed up and then never called for refunds or anything, which is unusual. But again, this is anonymous sources and whatnot, so can't really clamp that one down. But certainly there was evidence of people messing around and inflating numbers. The Deadline did it. But nevertheless, with all that said and done, it looks to be that it made its money. Now, I don't know that it's true that it needed $750 million to break even, but hey, they managed to make a $10 million profit this weekend. So, I don't know. But it looks to me like this is a profitable film. So, good enough. Where will it make $1 billion? I'm dubious, but I suppose. But it doesn't really look like it. But nevertheless, it made its money. But going forward and continuing this line, and of course the demographic showed the audience was predominantly male. Yeah. The only movie that had, for a superhero movie that got a lot of women out was Aquaman. So, we all know why that, you see, it's just the way it is. So going forward with this, if you think this is a good template, I don't think so. And so it all boils down to, would Endgame be the last Jedi for the MCU? I don't think so. But the odds are that we're going to get a Last Jedi style movie from the MCU pretty quick here. And then everything comes to an end, and that's the way it goes. And when you're obsessed with patting yourself on the back by pandering to groups that you see as marginalized, and you're the great savior coming to save them all, and you're wonderful, rather than plot the character development and to where you're scared to let your character struggle because they're a member of some group, you've already lost. And people will start to walk away. But you can never take away the achievement that Marvel did in the past 10 years. It's an astounding thing. It's sad to see it commit suicide, apparently, if this keeps going, if that's how it ends, rather than just fading away. But like I said, all good things, All right. Thank you for listening to me go on and on about this damn Captain Marvel movie. I can't say there won't be another one. I don't know. But anyway, yes, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. And for those of you who have subscribed, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And while you're here, you know what to do. Yes, check out that link description below. That'll take you to my many stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Bye-bye.